Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL People's Poll. My name is James. I've given Suj the day off because we're going to be focusing specifically on one particular Premier League club. So we thought we'd get our correspondent involved. On Friday, there was large speculation that Chris Wilder would be leaving Sheffield United Football Club. And on Saturday, there was confirmation of a mutual termination of Wilder's contract between Wilder himself and Sheffield United. So it feels an appropriate time to get our Blades correspondent on. Ben Tomo Thompson at FPL_Blade on Twitter. How are you, Tomo?
I've been better. I think it's the best way to say it. So it's
What's the immediate emotion with what's happened?
I think my main emotion is frustration, sadness, and I think I've witnessed the best 4 or 5 years that I'll ever witness at my club, which is kind of a hard pill to swallow. So it's tough. It's been a tough year since lockdown. Being a Sheffield United fan, it's been tough to watch, tough to go through. So it's not been good. Obviously, everyone's had a tough year, but I'm not even being able to enjoy as perform the same way we did before lockdown. So it's been tough.
Is there any? I know it's difficult because the 99% of Blades fans are obviously unhappy that Wilder's gone, but is there any sense of relief in any way, like, oh, we can look forward to a new chapter now, or is it just exactly what you said? You feel like the club's had the best spell, certainly in this century under Wilder, and if you feel like that's going to be really difficult to replicate?
I think it's going to be very, very difficult to replicate. I'm not saying we can't bounce back next year. I'm not saying that, but as a fan, the dream is to have a Blades fan in charge, a Blades fan as captain, and you go on that run that we had, that 4 years. Arguably, we were probably had the best 4 years of any fan in the world. That 4 years, like promotions and last year, and it was just unbelievable. It was like a dream, really.
So Wilder took over in 2016.
Yeah.
He'd performed miracles where he'd been previously. Originally started at Alfreton Town. This is a man who's really come through the football pyramid. Had a spell at Halifax Town, did well there. He did okay at Oxford United, and then had a remarkable spell going to Northampton Town, where they were on the brink of getting relegated to the conference, what is now obviously the National League, the fifth tier in English football. Got them up to mid-table and then stormed to the League Two title the following season with 99 points. And then obviously went home. In a lot of people's minds, I understand he was actually a ball boy originally at Bramall Lane. So he's been a lifelong Sheffield United fan. He'd had 2 spells with you as a player. Went to your club when you were probably at your lowest ebb. He's kind of been at your club when you've been at the highest ebb and the lowest ebb. So, I mean, can you remember back to when Wilder took over and what your thoughts were at that time? It's probably worth saying, Tommy, you were brought up in Sheffield, but now live in America. So I don't know, would you have had exposure to be able to watch the Blades in League One?
Yeah, I watched all the games. That's when I first started. So
okay.
I watched every game. I actually was at the final game of the season for Nigel Atkins the season before, which was probably the lowest we've ever been. And he was everything we didn't want in a manager. He blew a lot of smoke up a lot of people in his face. And I remember the players and Atkins got booed off the final game of the season. And that was probably the lowest I've ever been after 6 years in League One. And it was tough. And when Wilder came in, I didn't know much about him. I knew obviously he played for Sheffield United and before my time watching. I didn't really know much about him, to be totally honest. But when we'd had a couple of different, Blades fans and managers prior to that, or ex-players, and I didn't really know much. And he came in, and the first 4 games were horrific. We were bottom of the league on 0 points. And I remember I was at that last game. I think it was Southend. I think we lost to. And I was with my dad and my uncle, and I said, "This is the worst I've ever seen us play." And that was as low as it ever got because that was falling on from the Atkins season, and then all of a sudden it flipped a switch and we got 100 points.
And stormed to the league title. Do you when you think back to that and days like losing at home to Southend and the players getting booed off, does that bring a bit of realism and acceptance to what's happening at the moment when you think, okay, this is bad, we feel disappointed, etc. But then you reflect on that feeling 5 years ago and think, well, haven't we come a long way? The feeling now must be better than where the football club, it's obvious, where the football club was when Wilder came in the door.
I think it's just super raw right now, so a lot of fans are not looking at it that way. But you just got to look across the city and see what's going on over there, and put things into context on where we are compared to where they are and where we were in that position in League One, like you said 5 years ago. And the club's stable. We've got some good young players. The academy is doing well. There's a lot to build on, but everybody wanted Chris Wilder for forever, which I think there was always a chance he was going to move on at some point, not in these circumstances, but,
I mean, you've said to me privately, you hope he gets the England job one day, right? So I think there was an acceptance that if he, in spite of the fact it was his club, if he continued to maintain Sheffield United as a top half Premier League club, eventually someone with a little bit more power, be it an Everton or a Newcastle or something even higher, was possibly going to say, well, look, we'll treble your money. What do you want to do about it? So was there always an acceptance and a belief, or was the feeling like this guy will be our manager till he doesn't want to do it anymore, basically?
So I always thought that he would move on at some point in time, but in the opposite circumstances of, he's took us, we've been in the Premier League for a few seasons, we're stable and a big club, an Arsenal, a Tottenham, or, a top six club coming for him. And you can't hold people back. You want, he deserves the opportunity. But I think the problem is with this situation is, has he been sacked? I don't know. I still don't know the whole story. Has he been sacked? Has he moved on? There's obviously disagreement, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it's the circumstance and the way it's happened. If he had moved on because he had a better opportunity at the end of the season, I think the Blaze fans would have took it a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely understandable. It's worth saying, obviously, when you came up, unlike a few other teams who have kind of been at Premier League level and dipped into League One, you were in there for 5 years, basically, and not doing too much about it. As you said, when he came in the door, I mean, he was talking about being a bottom half League One side. Do you remember when you came up, what the expectations were in the Championship amongst the fans and the club? Was there an expectation that you could then go and push to another level? Because I think Nigel Watkins himself took Southampton basically through 2 divisions, didn't he? And there were other clubs who'd done similar. So was there an expectation of the second jump could be made, or was it that first season would be happy to stay up?
I think it was very similar to my expectations when we come to the Premiership. When we talked, I thought we'd be okay. I think we'd be mid-table, maybe lower, top half or the bottom half of the table situation. I didn't think we could get close to the playoffs in that first season. And actually, we were top in November time. I think we were. I remember we beat Burton Albion, I think it was, and Paul Coots broke his leg, and we were top of the league at that point, and then fell off in the second half of the year.
But there's a game that I remember really well from that season. You came up and finished 10th. There's a game that I've referenced loads of times for the older listeners to Planet FPL, was when you won 4-2 at Hillsborough.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was a rare Championship game that I watched that year, and I guess it was the first time you'd probably played each other for, I guess, 4 or 5 years or so.
But yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I remember this little skinny lad, David Brooks, stood out like a sore thumb. He did. I think he got the 4th goal, if I maybe remember correctly. But you were brilliant. You played some really good football, which is. The Championship as a league has obviously developed a lot. We see teams like Barnsley and gegenpressing and stuff now. It's a lot different to your typical kind of outlook of what the Championship looks like. But I was so impressed with the way you played. And I think with clubs like yours, for people who are around my age, pushing 40 and a bit more, etc., probably remember you most from Harry Bassett, Neil Warnock, a little bit direct, tough to play against, bit of an intimidating atmosphere when you go to Bramall Lane. And I'm watching this and going, I tell you what, this team plays good football. Didn't watch a lot more of you, but 10th was a great finish. And then obviously the following year, won promotion, which included some fairly amazing comments from Chris Wilder drunk after promotion, reference to Muppets from Leeds, digging out a lot of people. Was that when you think back to specifically that the drunk talk that was coming out of him? I think it was in the suite in the main stand at Bramall Lane. There was events at the town hall as well where he was clearly he'd had one too many. Was that just pride? Because when I watched them videos back, I think you can tell his passion for Sheffield. He's obviously a pissed man, but he you can tell his love for the club. And there was always with Wilder, I think of, he's like the everyday person. He's not like a football manager who's completely uncontactable. I mean, Wilder talks about being in the middle of Sheffield and just going down the pub and stuff and having a beer with his mates. He's spoken in press conferences recently and said, I miss going down the pub with my mates in Sheffield and stuff. You just think, I can't think of a top flight manager would be like that now. Do you reflect on that afterwards and think there's so much pride in how much joy he and you felt at that time winning promotion when it wasn't really expected? Or do you look back at it now and think he was pissed, it's regrettable?
No, it was awesome. That's just like it was just as fans, you know, that's how we all felt. You know, it was a sense of relief because we've gone through. I mean, being a Sheffield United fan, you know, I'm in my early 30s, and it was tough. It's tough for me because I kind of missed the Bassett, and I went through. I mean, I had the Warnock times, but like you said, with the Warnock times, it was very direct football, and it wasn't great to watch. And Warnock's a polarizing person anyway, right? A lot of our fans didn't like him, whereas Wilder's just one of those and says it as it is, and we play fantastic football, and you know that's the pinnacle. That promotion was the pinnacle as a Sheffield United fan in my lifetime, for sure.
Did it mean more because I remember Chris Basham's obviously winning goal at Ellen Road was massive, and we kind of got a little glimpse there into the overlapping centre backs. I mean, when we first spoke to you, it was kind of all the rage. Wait till you see these overlapping centre backs, and it was like, I can't wait to see this. Was there? I mean, is there a real rivalry with Leeds? I know obviously Wednesday's the big enemy, but the fact that you were going up against Leeds and they'd obviously spent so long out of the Premier League as well, there was Wilder's comments, the Muppets from Leeds, etc. Did it mean a little bit more because there was a little bit of Yorkshire rivalry surrounded around that promotion fight?
Absolutely, it meant a lot. I mean, obviously Wednesday is the big deal, but Leeds is the second biggest game. You know, rivalry I have. It always has been a big rivalry, and you know, as a Sheffield United fan at that point in time, you're always pessimistic of it's not going to happen. You know, we're not going to get promoted. We're going to screw it up. Like that's always the way that I always felt as a Sheffield United fan. I was always, you know, thinking on when the wheels are going to fall off. Right, a bit like this season before, we did well and then faded away at the end. But that game, when Basham scored and we won that game 1-0, I knew we were up at that point. So that was literally, I think that's when all the Sheffield United fans went, we're going to do this. And I remember watching that game, and it was, Leeds battered us that game. I don't know if you saw that game, but they dominated us in that game, and they hit the woodwork, made a few good saves, but we got them on the counter attack and won 1-0. But yeah.
When promotion was confirmed and then you're looking forward to the Premier League, you must be aware that probably everybody who hasn't seen you is saying you're definitely going to get relegated. There's a famous Jason Cundy quote on TalkSport. Oh yeah, they're a flat back four. Yeah, they'll be hard to beat. And it's like, you've never watched them, have you, mate?
Absolutely.
How much pride was there in the way you were playing in getting promoted, and then the belief to then go and show that in the Premier League? Because you must have had doubts in terms of whether you could show that quality at the top level.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, these players are from League One, majority of these players, right? All the way through, and we didn't spend that much money, and there was doubts, but I was pretty confident when we were on in the summer. I said we'd finish. I think we said we'd finish 13th or 12th. I think I said. And everybody else, I think, on the correspondence had us last, right? Or 19th.
Yeah,
pretty much. And the way we started, I think we were undefeated for the first 8 games, or I think it was 8 games.
You had a great start.
Like yeah, and I mean, another pinnacle was when Sharp scored against Bournemouth. I was actually at my sister's wedding in Exeter when that game was going on, and I was watching it on my phone while they were doing the speeches. And yeah, I remember that. It was pretty epic. But yeah, I mean, it was just, I couldn't believe it. Like, I just couldn't believe what was happening, how he played. And we went to Chelsea, we were 2-0 down and came back and drew 2-2. That was an amazing game. We had some big games during that spell. Went to Everton and won 2-0. It was just a fairy tale that never seemed like it was going to end. So it was just awesome.
You had a game against us, which many of our followers might remember from my scrap VAR run after the game when you had a goal disallowed ridiculously. There are links in terms of our feelings. I understand to a certain extent how you feel at the moment, because obviously at different levels, but I went through this with Pochettino immediately after you came to White Hart Lane and completely outplayed us, and not a joke. That game was the first time that I reflected afterwards and went, Pochettino's in real big trouble here. And it's not so much even about the results now. It was that day he was completely outcoached by Chris Wilder, genuinely. And watching the game and going, I don't see Tottenham with tactical ideas, a system, a fluidity to how they want to play. Your lot rocked up, underdogs, expected to get beat in most games, and you played at 100 mile an hour, and these overlapping centre-backs, particularly on the left side with Jack O'Connell, as soon as the ball went out to Ender Stevens, he'd come out of centre-back position and go and run past him. It was like, what is this? No one plays like this. And the overload you created, particularly on that left side, but sometimes on the right-hand side as well, was so damaging to teams because they hadn't played against anything like it before. And I obviously understand the emotion of what you say about has my club just had the best 4 or 5 years in its history. For us, it's not quite like that. But in terms of what I physically watched on a football pitch, that's definitely the best Tottenham team that I've seen. And then look at what I'm watching now, and you think, well, can we ever be to that level again where people go, oh yeah, genuinely, I think Tottenham might be able to win the league and stuff like that. And Pochettino had obviously built up such a rapport with the Tottenham fan base. Now it's different because he was someone who came in from overseas, no links to the clubs, etc. We didn't even know if he'd speak English at first. Whereas you had, as Blades fans will say, the Chris Wilder, one of our own, right? So I understand that feeling now of, oh, I'm not sure that whoever's going to be next, I don't know if I even want that. So you played so well at White Hart Lane that day. You ended up finishing, I think you finished 9th last season, didn't you, in the end? And even at the restart period, where you had the ridiculous goal that never was at Villa Park, I think I'm right in saying if you'd have won that game, you would have gone 5th. And there was genuinely could Sheffield United qualify for the Champions League? And this is 9 months ago. We're not talking about something in distant memory. Did the whole lockdown thing, do you think it affected, I know it's affected a lot of clubs, obviously, but looking at the results, obviously, in the back end of last season, you finished, after some good results where you well beat Tottenham, well beat Chelsea, you didn't finish well. And obviously this season, we know what it's been. Did that really destabilise the football club in terms of the break, the slower tempo of football, the lack of fans? Did that have a real big effect, you think, to what we've now seen?
Yeah, I remember we did the correspondence before the Villa game, right? And we talked about it. You said you would think it would affect us more than anybody else, and that is so true. I think it's the extra subs, not having the fans, because all our games have been, up till the weekend, but all our games have been closed, and they've not been much different to like last year. And just that extra man and that extra, especially at Bramall Lane, even away too, we went wild. I think it's affected us more than any other club in the Premiership by a way. Maybe you can say Liverpool at home too, but especially for us. And I think it's affected Chris Wilder too, because he's not down at the pub with his mates. He's not getting the backing and supporting when he sees people in town.
I think that's a great
point.
He's
isolated. I think that is one of the biggest things, right? Because before, and people say, Chris, we love you, best manager ever. And, it's been a tough. It's just been tough, right? So
there's a brilliant article from a game you had in the championship after one game where you played a 12:30 game or something. And Wilder's laughing after the game. He's going, "This is absolutely brilliant. I finished work at 3:00. I can go down the pub. I want more early kickoffs and stuff like that." So that's something I'd not thought about. But actually, yeah, we never considered the mental aspect for players and managers. What's it like for them in this period where you've just got work? They're still working the same as they always worked. But the moments of release, like in Wilder's case of, okay, I'll go and see my mates or etc., is obviously not there. His morale has possibly, you're quite right, gone on and affected the rest of the team as well. Because I don't think Wilder was shy in saying that if you had a great result, I mean, look at the party when you got promoted, right? They all went and got pissed.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was shy to say, look, if there's 5 days till the next game, if you want to go and have a beer, go and have a beer. And keep up. I think the team camaraderie around the squad was really important. As you said, many of that squad that are even still there now played for you in League One. So it was a real collective. Moving on towards what's obviously happened this season, do you feel like that collective was a little bit broken somewhat by Zanderberger obviously coming in January on a big salary and a big transfer fee, and then obviously Aaron Ramsdale and Rhian Brewster, the two most highly profile signings last summer. Do you think that affected the morale amongst the squad in some way, that there were people coming in and reportedly on much higher wages than what some other people who had been there since League One and helped get the club where it was?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case. From what I've heard and what I've seen, obviously Ramsdale was there before, so he knows the club inside out. Everyone was kind of Berge as a guy. I mean, I never heard a bad word said about him. And Brewster, I think, is a young lad, right? So, and everyone, I think, got pay rises, I believe, after last season. So I don't know if that's the case. I think the morale in the club, I think it was still okay. I just think it's not having the fans is the biggest thing. And I really do. Just that extra for us.
We had you on Clash of the Correspondents before you played Fulham in the first game after the first international break. And your prediction for that game made by Jaw Drop when you predicted yourselves to get beat by Fulham. And this was going back to after game week 4. You knew quite early that it was all wrong, didn't you?
Yeah. I had a feeling about it. I could sense it. I could sense it coming. We weren't playing the same style. We weren't as gung ho. We weren't first to every tackle. It just didn't seem right, and everything was going against us in those early games too. Did we play Villa before then? We got the red card against Villa.
It was game week 2, I want to say, maybe.
Yeah, there was a couple of early games that we should have got points out. We didn't, and I had a feeling that we should have probably lost. We dominated Fulham in the first half, but we got dominated in the second half. We probably should have lost that game, which was a penalty. We got a dodgy penalty, I think, at the end of that game. So it's just tough. I sensed it early on.
You had a point where, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably maybe January time, where I know there was an angry moment where you'd probably in yourself come to terms where maybe it's best that Wilder goes now because you just can't turn it around.
After the Crystal Palace game.
Yeah. Why did it get that far for you? Because I know there was a lot of reaction to that at the time. There was a lot of Blades fans were saying to you, look, you can't feel like this. And I stuck up for you a little bit and said, well, you're entitled to feel how you want. At the moment, everybody's hurting and unhappy, and then people reacting in different ways. Like at Tottenham now, it's Mourinho's fault or it's the board's fault because they haven't spent money. People feel differently about things. So why did it get so far for you? And I think you regretted it, that you wanted change at that point.
Yeah, because it wasn't Chris Wilder that we all knew. It wasn't Sheffield United the way we played. We just basically sat back and got beat 2-0 against not a great Crystal Palace team, nothing against them. But I think we played Southampton the week before and got battered 3-0, and we didn't look like scoring. We just didn't try. We didn't Wilder used to throw 4 strikers on everyone who was in, just go for it, right? And we didn't have that, and he came out, and the way he talked, it just didn't. I knew something wasn't right. I feel like from that point, I've been watching a horror movie that I know what the end's going to be. That makes sense. And I know this is like, it's happened. Because I think after that, he nearly walked. There was rumors over that week. I think it was the week after Crystal Palace game. There was rumors that he was gone and he wasn't there. And then it never happened. And since then, it's always been, if you listen to his interviews, since that pretty much point, they've all been pretty negative. And he's complained about the chairman on multiple occasions not having the money, the difference in salaries, not able to compete, and making a lot of excuses, to be totally honest, which is not like Wilder. You know, usually in the past, he says it as it is. We're not good enough. You know, we need to get players out. We need to get better. And that's kind of what I've seen since that point. And it's just, I don't know what's happened.
Do you think, because I mean, the line is obviously mutual consent with the fact that he's left, and it is extremely unusual for a departing manager to have a quote surface on official website. Do you think that's because there's so much respect for his achievements, or because it was actually mutual consent where Wilder's gone, Jed, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore?
I think it's mutual consent. I don't know, to be totally honest. I don't know what's going on. I don't think we've got all the story, that's for sure. And the Prince has come out on several occasions saying he wants Wilder to be his manager for the next 5 years as well, on a few different interviews. So, and everybody wants it. I don't understand what's going on, to be honest. I think it's this football director of football, that's probably tipped it over the edge. Wilder wanting full control of the transfers. And apparently, when I was reading today, is we signed a guy called Koulibaly who went to play on our Belgian team, for our Belgian team. Beershot. And apparently Wilder had nothing to do with it, didn't know anything about it. So,
yeah, Prince Abdullah, he gave an interview, and there's some quotes I found on TalkSport's website, actually, as after you beat West Bromwich Albion. And he was quite bullish about a few things. I mean, he actually said that he thought if you stayed up, it would get made into a Hollywood movie, which seems like a strange thing for a football chairman to say, in all honesty. But he says he flew over to tell Wilder that his job was safe. Now, this is only in January. Prince Abdullah told Jim White at TalkSport, he told Chris Wilder, "You are our coach and we are going to stick with you even if we lost all the rest of the games, because we think you are the coach that will get us out of the championship." Yep. So what's changed? Because you haven't been, forget Leicester, because obviously Chris Wilder wasn't there.
Yeah.
You haven't been worse since that West Bromwich Albion game than you were before the West Bromwich Albion game. So something's brought on this change. And I think the rumour that most people seem to believe is there's a clash over this idea that you wanted to get a director of football in who was going to be responsible for transfer dealings, because there was a lot of unhappiness with how Wilder spent money on people like Ramsdale and Brewster last summer. And I think there were some other targets that were mentioned, perhaps like Ollie Watkins was one, although I think he was always likely to go to Villa and play for Dean Smith anyway, having had that link with Brentford. It's the same thing. Ross Barkley was probably, with respect, was going to choose to go and play for Aston Villa as well.
Absolutely.
So why do you think, if that's true, why do you think the club are looking to bring a director of football in?
I think it's just a model that majority of Premiership clubs have, if not, 90% Premiership clubs have director of football, I believe. I'm not sure. But he has had a lot of money to spend. We haven't had the wages to compete, but we spent 120 and then we spent 100 the year before, right? I mean, we've signed McBurney for 20 million. We've signed Brewster for 25, Ramsdale for 18, Burge for 22. We spent money that I thought we'd never spend, right? So he's had the money to spend. But this team we've got now is worse than a team that got promoted from the Championship. It's starting 11.
But then against Wilder, that's a fair comment then to say that he spent the money badly, isn't it?
Yeah. And anyone that says he done is not being realistic. He hasn't spent well. He hasn't bought the right players. And a lot of people are going to say, well, it's because we can't afford the wages. We can't go for Callum Wilson at 20 million. We have to go for Brewster because Callum Wilson's on triple the wage, which probably is the truth. But he's decided those players, and he's probably had to gamble a lot of them. And we've paid for McBurney and Brewster and Ramsdale, we paid the top value for those players, in my opinion. 18 million for Ramsdale is not a bargain. You know, I think it's 23 million for Brewster, who's unproven. You know, Bernie 20 million. It's a fault. If you're going to take all the credit for what's happened, he's also going to take all the responsibility of what's happened now. He's been in full control of the club, and as that, he's in charge of what's happened this season. And it hasn't been good, right?
I mean, there's certain mitigating circumstances. Obviously, I mean, Dean Henderson was obviously a massive loss. It was absolutely fantastic for you, and I think whoever you'd got in was probably not going to be quite to the standard of Henderson. Yeah. It's worth saying Ramsdale is quite a young goalkeeper. You know, I've been heavily critical of him. I was from game week 1. I thought the goals against Wolves he should have done better with.
It's shocking.
But he's been better in the last couple of months. Actually, there's a few games that
he's our best player
really well in. Actually, so it might be that the pressure's off him now somewhat. You've obviously had the injuries defensively. Jack O'Connell's been the biggest one, I think.
Yeah. I think he's probably, I said this to you before last time I was on, O'Connell is the most important player for us in any club in the Premiership because he can't be replaced. That's the problem of playing these overlapping centre backs. You can't just go buy one. They don't exist. You have to mold one, right? And that's been the issue. And we've not looked balanced. We've not had that threat since he's been out.
We saw immediately in the restart period, you had a game at Newcastle where I think I'm right in saying O'Connell missed and Robinson played at left-sided centre-back. And you became so weighted towards attacking to the right side that Newcastle could see it coming. Then I think John Egan got sent off in the same game, didn't he? And we got a sighter of what Sheffield United might look like without said centre-backs. Obviously, Chris Basham is the third part of the trio, who have all missed time at one part or another this season. O'Connell's missed all of it, basically. And I think we could see then in hindsight what the issues would be as soon as something happened. I think it's probably regrettable in hindsight that Wilder didn't buy someone that was an able deputy particularly for O'Connell. We know he can't have foreseen that he would miss the whole season. But it was that obvious then back to that Newcastle game in a restart period that if you lost these guys at centre-back, it was going to be a huge, massive problem. And I think even back to the Villa game, with obviously the VAR controversy, back to that game, Villa did something that teams hadn't been doing against you and was putting it over John Egan's head and challenging him.
Yeah.
And he struggled. Yeah. And suddenly, with that little period of rest, I think people began to identify what your strengths were and what your weaknesses were. Because previously, what happened was everybody was still worried about the strengths and the overlaps in the wide areas rather than worrying about, well, how can we actually exploit you? And it's remarkable, actually, for a team that's been, with respect, so bad this season. I still see teams week after week changing their system to deal with you.
Yeah.
To complement that problem in the wide areas. We played a back three against you. I think Liverpool played 4-2-3-1 the first time round. We've seen others change their system specifically to deal with you. But then I think teams worked out what some of the weaknesses were as well. What's your expectations is the wrong word. What's your thoughts about immediately the rest of this season?
Target us in every single game with your captain. That's what I think.
That's an FPL answer, right?
Yeah, an FPL answer. I think it's going to be an absolute nightmare.
If I said to you in game week 30, I've got Rafinha against Sheffield United, Harry Kane against Newcastle, Bruno Fernandes against Brighton, who would you tell me to captain?
Rafinha. That was my captain already.
Is that the negative fan in you, or is that the general right answer that you believe?
I mean, it's watching that game on Sunday.
So
watching that game was we quit. I've never seen us quit.
Yeah,
we quit, and if it wasn't for Ramsdale, we'd have lost 10-0, and that's not exaggeration.
No, you were lucky to get out there with 5-0. It's worth saying that Leicester are one of the best teams in the league and proved it at the weekend.
Yeah.
But there was a certain element to the way the second half unfolded was like heads have gone. And that had never really happened. You've lost the odd game 3-0 or so, but generally it was 2s or 1s. 1-0 or 2-0 or 2-1 was a common result if you got beat. And the heads went down on Sunday. And I think it was quite telling what Paul Higginbottom, who is obviously standing in till the end of the season, who had a poor spell, ironically, in charge of Leeds, said that the players were really struggling mentally because their leader had gone.
Yeah.
Are we in a situation now where, in hindsight, Chris Wilder got championship players to play extremely well, and now the championship players are still in the Premier League without the manager who got them playing to their peak?
Yeah, I think that's the case. 100%.
There aren't many games left where actually I think you can be targeted from a captaincy perspective, looking at the fixture, because actually your fixture list for the remainder of the season, there aren't too many of the bigger clubs left, actually, ironically. But there is, honestly, there's no chance of you pulling this round in any way, is there?
No.
What about Sunday? Or is it Saturday? There's an FA Cup tie Sunday. Yeah. There's an FA Cup tie at Stamford Bridge. Could something miraculous be saved out of this season?
It could be, you know. I mean, it's hard to tell, right? Because I think with Sunday, everything that happened, you know, the back and forth on Saturday, no one really knew till late Saturday it was official, right? So you can't, and Heckingbottom, I think he said he found out Saturday night at like 7 o'clock that he was going to manage the game. So you can't blame Heckingbottom. You can't play the players. I don't know if you saw Baldock's interview. He was still calling Wilder the gaffer, and you know the old sad ones. Billy Sharp's interview pretty much made me cry.
Yeah, it's harsh.
It was hard. So I think maybe take it with a pinch of salt. I want to see how we play Sunday before I target us for Leeds against us in the following week to see how we kind of react. But football's a strange way, right? It wouldn't surprise me if we win that game 1-0 against Chelsea. But probably very, very small odds. But I think it's either going to be, we could get bad to be totally honest.
It would be mad to be sitting here this time next week and thinking Sheffield United are going to Wembley. Yeah. In this car crash of a season for you to think, oh, I mean, imagine that. Imagine you win and you've got Bournemouth in the FA Cup semi-final. You'll feel very different this time next week if that was to be the case.
Yeah. I'm trying to take the positives out of it. I think the way that club's set up, I think we always were going to be a bit of a yo-yo club, right? And we overachieved. And I think us overachieving last season hurt us. I think it hurt Wilder. I think we got a little too arrogant as a fan base. I think Wilder got a little too arrogant in his purchases. I think he bought young players for the future, thinking that we weren't going to get relegated. Because I mean, we talked and we said, "Oh, Wilder's not going to let us. We won't be in the relegation battle."
There aren't many of us that did think. I mean, you said last year, I think it was all but 2 of the correspondents predicted you to get relegated. This year, there was only 1 that predicted that you would. So none of us really thought that you would. I think none of us thought you'd finish top half, but we all thought, 13th, 14th, they'll be okay. Was the general kind of consensus of where it would be at for the season.
Yeah. So I think we spent that 120 million on young players: Ramsdale, Brewster, Burge from before, Lowe and Bogle, and we didn't really buy some seasoned players that improved our starting 11 right away, walked right into our team and said, those players, Callum Wilson. I keep it about Callum Wilson. Because if we had Callum Wilson, I think we'd be okay.
Well, to be honest, maybe you would have, because, I mean, your best forward this season, in my opinion, has been McGoldrick. And he's arguably been your best outfield player this season, actually.
He's been the best. I think he's been our best player this season,
I don't know why I said outfield player like it was going to be Ramsdale, because I didn't mean that. But then there's that, right? You've got Sharp there. The money's been spent on McBurney and Brewster. And yet it's McGoldrick, who was so pivotal in that kind of role originally behind the front two in the season you got promoted, who's the one who stepped up. Stepped up might not be the right word, but he's the one that you always think, McGoldrick needs to play, actually. So I don't think that the club or Wilder were wrong in trying to buy players for the future. But I agree that there was nothing that was brought in other than Ramsdale. You obviously had to have a goalkeeper. There was nothing that was brought in that immediately made the team better. Even in the case of Sander Berg, if you go back to when he originally came into the club, you couldn't say for definite, oh, he's definitely an improvement or an upgrade on John Lundstrom. You also haven't been helped this year by drop of standards by a number of players. So, I mean, Wilder himself joked about John Fleck being Jimmy Fleck. He'd gone to play in the Highlands League for a few months. It'd been so bad. And Oliver Norwood was absolutely brilliant for you in the first half of last season, I would say, and has dropped alarmingly in that position where look, his distribution is still good, but he's had a bad season, to be honest.
His legs have gone, totally gone. People just walking past him. And yeah, you're right. Lundstrom, the whole Lundstrom saga didn't help either. That's a whole other situation. He's going through the motions, and a lot of Blades fans can't wait to see the back of Lundstrom now.
He's out of contract, isn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't want to sign you.
Do you? I mean, I guess one plus is that a lot of the squad that have been there through League One, etc., will stay. That back line of O'Connell, Basham, and Egan could well line up together again in the Championship next season, with people like Bogle and Brewster more experienced for having some exposure into top flight football.
Yeah.
We've seen obviously the benefits of, and I guess this is part of the argument for maybe not sacking Wilder, is you look at what Sean Dyche has done at Burnley. And if you think back, if they'd have sacked him in 2015 when they got relegated, would they have come back and done what Burnley, we think of them as part of the fabric and the furniture now. It's an assumption that Burnley will be a Premier League team. So, I mean, if you watched them at the weekend, they played some blinding football. And Norwich, who a case last year, couldn't defend for Toffee, hung around with Daniel Farker, and now look like they're going to romp away with the Championship and come back again. And they might be better for the experience, as were Burnley. And I think that's the biggest bit of anger amongst Blades fans is, there's the thank you for everything he's done. And this season's obviously been bad. And if his name wasn't Chris Wilder, he would have been sacked 3 months ago if he didn't have the history of bringing you through. If he'd have been a new manager in August, for example, he'd have been gone by October in all probability. There was obviously grace and understanding for what he'd achieved. I think the biggest upset for Blades fans now is that they feel the best chance of bouncing back, like a Norwich look like they're going to do, is also now gone. Because the list of names being linked with the job is not... It doesn't give me much hope when you look at the names. Is this someone you've got in mind, or you think, oh, I'd like him to be the next manager, the sort of person you think you should be targeting?
Yeah, Chris Wilder.
I knew you were going to say that, and I understand that as well. Listen, there's a lot of Tottenham fans, if Mourinho went tomorrow, would go, Pochettino as the obvious answer. I get that you feel like that.
I think if I had to choose one, it'd probably be Eddie Howe, but I don't know if that would happen.
He's a name that's certainly in the running, apparently. Now, ironically, he obviously had a spell at Burnley some time ago, which didn't work out for him. He couldn't settle in the North. You're obviously a club in the North as well. He's also been quite strongly linked with the Celtic job, actually, Eddie Howe. Would you prefer to have someone like that who, at least he's got the experience of getting Bournemouth out of the Championship and obviously stabilising in the Premier League? Or would you rather back someone who's got the experience of the league? I mean, could you vision a scenario where Neil Warnock came back, for example?
I think that bridge is burned from last time when he left.
No, I get that, but he knows how to get teams out of that league, doesn't he?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Or would you rather have someone who's a little bit unproven, like Frank Lampard, for example, who you know the potential of the coach is possibly there?
Lampard's interesting. I don't think Lampard's a great manager, to be totally honest, yet. But in the Championship, look at Derby, the resources he has and the players he brought in, Mason Mount and players like that on loan. I think Lampard's interested. I don't know. I think it's just too early to tell, to be honest. It's just anybody but Chris Wilder in charge is just hard to vision. It's hard for me to watch this weekend, just not listening to him shouting on the sidelines.
The name that's had favouritism with the bookmakers in England is Michael Appleton, who's the Lincoln City manager. They're third in League One at the moment. He's got no prior links to Sheffield United at all. And they've actually lost 3 of their last 5 in League One, Lincoln. But considering the size of their club, I mean, I think they're above Sunderland, for example. He's obviously doing a very, very good job there at the moment. He's quite experienced, had a spell at Portsmouth previously. But what do you think hearing that name linked?
I don't really know too much about him, to be totally honest. I think we've got to go away from these, EFL managers, to be totally frank. I think we've got to get someone who, if you look at our squad now, we've got a lot of good young English players. We've got quite a lot of young players. As if you look at under 23s, we've got a few players in that squad who I think can do well in the Championship as well. I think we need to get someone who can work with young players and has a bit of a track record of that. And we might not bounce back right away. So it's something that we need to build upon, and someone that the fans can get behind, because whoever comes in after Wilder, it's going to be a really impossible job, I think, right? For them to match up to Wilder. And he's always going to get judged. Whoever comes in is going to get judged to Wilder.
I get that.
A bit like Ramsdale with Henderson this year, right? In different circumstances, but whoever came in was going to struggle, right? So it's going to be tough. I'm not sure what's going to happen, to be honest. So
I wish you luck, mate. Let's revisit this in a couple of weeks. I've got you booked to come on Clash of Correspondence with Bradley Parker before you travel to Wolves, which I think is before game week 32. So I think you've got Leeds and Arsenal before then, so we'll all be locking in, obviously, Rafinha and Aubameyang as captains in between then. But looking forward to catching up with you again then, mate. Thanks very much for giving up your time for us at such short notice as well. I think the majority of us will wish the Blades well, my friend. You can give Tomo a follow on Twitter, FPL_Blade. I'll be back tomorrow with Suj with Sky Fantasy Football Podcast. Thursday's Clash of Correspondence is FPL Seagull and FPL Footballer previewing Brighton and Newcastle in that big battle at the weekend. I'll be streaming a couple of times on Friday on YouTube as well. Just leaves me to say thanks very much to Tomo, and cue music, please, Manchild.